I'm not sure if I'm that excited to see how the Indiana Pacers offseason plays out. Key free agents, Ricky Rubio, TJ Warren, Jalen Smith, and Lance Stevenson, who's a non-bird. Notable non-guarantees. O'Shea Brissett is a $1.8 million team option. They should have picked that up 8 years ago. Dwayne Washington Jr. and Terry Taylor basically have 1.6 million non-guarantees that will guarantee in early July. Notable extension candidates on this team: Miles Turner, Buddy Hield, Goga Batadze has apparently been in the league for 3 years already. They have some notable trade exceptions too that if they wanted to use cap space, they need to renounce. But Doug McDermott, 7.3 million, expires July 7th. And then the Jeremy Lamb trade exception, 10.5 million, that expires February 8th, 2023, right around the trade deadline. Their best spending tool, if they're willing to get rid of those trade exceptions, would be 25 plus million in cap space. They are not being talked about as a team that could go out there and try and inflate the value of free agents, which I do find not odd because Indy's not a free agency destination, but like you could make a case that Miles Bridges, DeAndre Ayton, or Anthony Simons are all good fits there. Ayton predicated on, okay, well, what's happening to Miles Turner? The last note on them, though, is there was the report right around the draft. I think Woj said it, that they're looking to reshape the roster and actually rebuild with Rick Carlisle there. And so that means Brogdon's gone. That means Miles Turner should be gone probably as well. And that, I don't know, makes it less likely that you use your cap space to be aggressive on some of the younger guys in free agency. Maybe they're more of a cap space dumping ground. But this feels like it's going to be a highly active offseason because they're a team with cap space that has 2 to 3 players when you look at Buddy Hield that are almost guaranteed to move if you're really going the wholesale rebuilding route.
Yeah, they're a hard team to figure out. In a lot of ways, some of what we said about the Pistons applies to them because of the cap space, because of the options that creates. A difference, though, is that, like you said, there are some real tradable pieces that, are on decent numbers contract-wise with Turner, Brogdon, and Hield that, you're not sweetening those, I don't think, to get off maybe any of them. Maybe Hield.
I go back and forth on Brogdon. 3 years, 67.6 is like the idea that they were going to get a lottery pick for him, like the Wizards at 10 or the Knicks at 11. I mean, I know it's the Knicks, but and I mean, it's the Knicks, but that's like, what are you giving up for Mal? I would give up expiring salary if I really wanted him, sure, or shorter contracts, I guess. But would you give up a first, like, let's say a top 18 protected first rounder for Malcolm Brogdon?
I mean, it depends on how desperate I am for help at that position. I mean, the idea of Brogdon when healthy is a really good player. I mean, he's a starting caliber combo guard. That just, if healthy, has been
Brogdon when healthy is,
yeah,
the white.
Forever.
It's but like, yeah.
The thing though, like that relates to, so it's hard to pin down. Like, yeah, they've said they're leaning into the rebuild, and like the Tyrese Halliburton for Sabonis trade might make you think that that's the direction it's going, but like that's just a good trade, period, because it's arguable that Halliburton certainly is a better use of your resources based on contract stuff. But like you could just make the case that this year Halliburton will be a more helpful player to winning than Sabonis would have been. Like that's not a ridiculous thing to say potentially going forward. So it's hard to know like what direction they're signaling they're going. I guess for me, like I'm sort of treating them like the Pistons in terms of, yeah, whatever you want to do for a young talent acquisition, if that includes restricted free agency, great. But in addition, you got to trade these veterans. I think they're sort of a two-pronged, offseason approach that they need to embrace.
What do you think of, I think my most favorite Anthony Simons destination aside from Portland, I'm not even sure if Portland's my absolute favorite destination for him, but is San Antonio if they keep DeJounte Murray, which our podcast nearly blew up on the Southwest Division is after we recorded it because of
I know.
Once Jake Fisher said that he's hearing the same thing and the Hawks thinks it's close, I'm like, fuck, Jake Fisher said it. It's over. The Pacers, like, is that, even if you are rebuilding, he's 23, is that not enough? I consider Halliburton as someone who can develop into a lead playmaker, but do you view Simons and Halliburton as not enough, maybe lead ball handler playmaking types to make that your sort of backcourt of the future?
Yeah, I mean, Halliburton averaged over 9 assists when he was with the Pacers last year, so I think
his ISO offense for them was pretty good too.
Yeah, I think I don't have any real reservations about giving him the ball, especially if you're rebuilding and just like get these reps and see what happens. Simons is a tricky fit, like everywhere except next to Murray, because there's your defensive counterpart just fits perfectly. And so I don't know how much I like him and Halliburton. together. But like I actually do kind of like Halliburton and Ben Matherin, because you've got the off ball guy running around shooting that's super athletic and strong and could project physical tools wise to be a really good defender. And Halliburton is your like finesse shooter playmaker. I like on the ball stuff. I like they seem to me as kind of the lonely projectable cornerstones, of the Pacers that I don't want to mess with. Do whatever else you want to the roster, but I like those two together pretty well.
I'd probably steer clear of Miles Bridges unless you're going to keep Miles Turner. I just feel like you're going to need like a really good five. What have you made of and there need to be actually, there wouldn't need to be other moving parts involved. What have you thought? And they're probably, I'm sure Phoenix would want, what have you thought about the DeAndre Ayton sign and trade for Turner sort of framework that's been out there?
Yeah, I kind of like it. I guess I have reservations about giving Aiton the max, if that's what we're talking about to do this. But in terms of like a return for Turner, I don't think you're going to do better. Like if the reason he's still on the roster is, people were concerned about the post surgery, we won't give up a first for him. I mean, getting the number one overall pick, who's averaged a double double every year of his career, has held up, in against the switch heavy demands of playoff basketball. I think Aiton, and the idea of Aiton and Halliburton together is very appealing to me as a pick and roll combo. So I think if the Aiton for Turner sign and trade is on the table, I think that's probably the first place I'm looking if I'm the Pacers.
Are there any free agents who wouldn't cost a shit ton of money that you think make a lot of sense for the Pacers?
That's harder. I mean, I really did have them kind of going big fish first and then kind of working the rest out later. I don't know, like really like TJ Warren coming back seems semi unlikely, but depending on what kind of roster you're trying to build, bringing him back in, if assuming the Pacers know more about his sort of medical prognosis than anybody.
And you could technically view him as, if you're not going to save your cap space, maybe as a human trade exception. If you're
Yeah.
spending it elsewhere and then you have him on a short-term deal and he doesn't fit your timeline, but teams would want him if he's healthy for sure.
Yeah, I think almost every guy they consider signing should be with an eye towards what might we be able to flip him for at the deadline, just because you're preserving your optionality if you want to add veterans that could help you, chase the 8th playoff spot or 10th, I guess now, or whatever. But preserve the opportunity to just like really, really go full tear down, like partway through the season. So like someone like Gary Payton threads the needle. I'm going to just keep mentioning him because I like him next to Halliburton. And then as long as he stays healthy, and if the Pacers just aren't any good and they don't want to be any good, you could definitely trade him to a playoff team, because he just proved like in the postseason he's going to be able to stay on the floor and make a difference.
I had them I think they just probably need to whatever. It's without knowing what happens with Turner, Brogdon, it's so hard to pin because they're going to need a big.
Yep.
And if they're moving Turner and it's not for DeAndre Ayton, like, all right, who's that big? You have Isaiah Jackson and Gogo Pataza. You're going to need another one. I had Kyle Anderson penciled in for this team as just he's not going to ruin your timeline, even though he's older for it. And you just need a bigger body to move about the 3 and the 4 spots. I know he's mostly a 4 now. Doesn't provide much in the way of shooting for them. But if Buddy Hield is still on this roster and Brogdon and Halliburton and Turner are still on the roster, if you're looking to just thread that needle, see what you have for the start of next season, that's the plan. And you have the cap space to be all right, fuck it, we can give him a little bit more than the non-taxpayer MLE over a shorter term. Maybe he takes it with the promise of a bigger role. I just don't know. We went through the restricted free agents, but there aren't even a ton of interesting, cheaper, young free agents in this year's class. I thought about Jordan Mora for them would be fairly interesting. Jalen Noel, if Minnesota declines his team option, I'm not sure what they're going to do with that. But it's just that's how barren the market is right now. So they could be, maybe I don't want to say a lower end Kyle Anderson, but better stopgaps could be Juan Toscano Anderson, who's just cheaper, and that you can move him around the positional spectrum. I just don't know what they're gonna. I just don't. I feel like this is, if I had to predict, and this is kind of where I guess this conversation needs to head. I think both Brogdon and Turner will be traded this summer. I think this is the offseason that they take the stick of dynamite in full. The Sabonis, I know there's been other reports, but the Sabonis trade showed me that they're willing to do something seismic.
Yeah.
And I think they follow through with it this offseason.
I think I probably agree. What do you think? I mean, this goes the total opposite direction, but what do you think about a deal built around Gordon Hayward and Miles Turner? Everybody loves the homecoming angle, but certainly Charlotte would, I think, solve a lot of problems doing that. But is it just a question of how much sweetener do you need coming from Charlotte? And because look, Turner's expiring too, so it's not like you can really ask for the moon just to take on Hayward's money. But have you thought about that at all? Have you seen that? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've thought about it, and I just don't know what does Charlotte include as a sweetener at this
Right.
point because the Hayward money, and there's a chance like he makes you too good to maybe
Mm.
be where you want to be, but his fit on the roster is genuinely intriguing. And then from Charlotte's perspective, and this is the problem I ran into with Phoenix, they don't want to pay Ayton, and they don't seem like they want to pay any big more than like 20 million. Turner's not necessarily gonna be cheaper. He'll be cheaper than Ayton. I don't think he's getting the max, but like that's probably someone who's still getting 20 plus, I would guess,
Yeah.
unless something drastically changes. So I don't know how Charlotte would value him. I think the more popular framework has been does Kelly Oubre Jr., PJ Washington, and something get you Miles Turner? And even then for Indy, it's like, well, Oubre works, like could definitely fit on. I don't know. I feel like Rick Carlisle, he's someone Rick Carlisle might strangle, but
Yeah.
uh, you're doing that trade for PJ Washington and then the something. And is that enough for Miles Turner? If and when he gets traded, I'll be fascinated to see what his value is because it feels like that there's been division there with him for quite some time.
It's very much complicated by the fact that next offseason, if Turner plays well, like we already talking about him as a big that fits a lot of places just because of the stretch and the shot blocking. Like you really might be renting him with the best outcome being you're going to have to pay him close to 30 million a year to keep because I do think there'll be a pretty robust market for him if he's not terrible next year.
I will say I would love to see this be like if they were willing to play him, and I don't think that Ricardo would be. Let's make this a Kevin Knox team, just to
Yeah.
throw him out there. Someone I just want someone to play Kevin Knox 25 minutes a game for like 25 straight games just to see what happens. And I don't think the Pacers are that team, but it seems like they're certainly going to have the timeline flexibility to experiment with that. Anything else from you on them? Jared Culver, maybe? Like, is this a second draft Jared Culver team? Third
Any of
draft Jared
these
Culver team?
any of these potential rebuilders should all be the second draft guys. I mean, like, and the injury question mark guys, PJ Dozier, guys like that. I think are all in play.
Troy Brown Jr. would be possibly interesting here. Definitely not enough of a proven, like his shot selection would probably not be. It's not great, and he's an unproven shooter. But yeah, I'm with you that they should be among the teams that are looking for these second draft guys.